Today we're going to talk about square roots. This is chapter 9. Today will be a little bit of an introduction to square roots. We want to define it, and then we're going to just basically work with it a little bit today. Nothing big, nothing fancy, nothing hard, just some basic stuff. So let's look at what a square root is. Okay, here is the mathematical definition. A square root of a number n is a number m such that m squared equals n. And you have to read that real slow, okay? If I were going to put this in everyday terms, you could just put numbers in the place of n and m. Makes a little more sense. A square root of a number 16 is a number 4 because 4 times 4 is 16. A square root of a number 36 is 6 because 6 times 6 is 36. Okay, so definition of a square root is a number n of a number n is a number m such that m squared equals n. Okay, every positive number has two square roots, the positive and the negative. Okay, remember when you square a negative number, you get a positive answer. So you'll have two answers when you're taking the square root of a positive number. Now with 0, it's just 0. Okay, 0 is neither positive or negative. You just get one answer with 0. The radical sign, which you see here, represents the non-negative square root. Okay, again, dealing with 0, you have to say non-negative. So this, you will not get a negative answer when you see this unless there's a negative on the outside of it. Just one answer with these, with the radical sign. Plus, this sign is probably new to you, the plus and minus sign. That means when you're writing an answer and you have two answers, the positive and the negative, you can just write it as plus or minus. For instance, if I get my answer is positive 4, negative 4, I can write it as plus or minus 4, and that's how that's read. Okay, and you'll see that here in a second. So first, and we come to that first, actually. 16, the square root of 16 is 4 because 4 times 4 is 16. But it's a positive 4 and a negative 4 because negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16 also. Okay, 64, that would be 8, and that would be a positive and negative 8. Okay, and that's how you write the plus and minus sign. Square root of 144 is 12, and that's a positive and negative 12. Square root of 256 is 16. That would be a positive and negative 16. And then 625, square root is 25, positive and negative. Okay, and that is how you write those. So for each of the first part of your lesson, for each of the answers, you will have two, a positive and a negative, for the most part. Okay, let's look at the next slide. A perfect square is a number that is the square of an integer. Okay, so if you just take numbers and square them, you'll find perfect squares. So you see here, if I square 1, I get 1. 1's a perfect square. If I square 2, I get 4. 4 is a perfect square. Square 3, you get 9. 9's a perfect square. Square 5, you get 25. Square 6, you get 36. Those are perfect squares because the square root is an integer. Okay. So let's look at this one. Approximate a square root. What we want to look at, now this is an irrational number. It doesn't have a whole number square root, but we want to approximate it to the closest whole number square root. So let's think of a number that's close to that, that's a perfect square. Well, if I square 7, I get 49, right? 49 is a perfect square. What's the next one over 49? Well, squaring 8 gives you 64. Okay, well, what is 51 closer to, 49 or 64? 49. So take the 49, square root of 49, you get 7. So if we're approximating this to the whole number, we're going to say it's 7. Okay, 7. Find the perfect square that's closest to it and take the square root. Let's look at this one, 125. Well, that's not a perfect square, but let's square some numbers and see what we get. 10 times 10 is 100. 11 times 11 is 121. 121 is closer than 100, so we're going to use 11 times 11, 121. 12 times 12 is 144. There's two perfect squares. That 125 is in between. Which one is closer? Well, 121 is closer. So take the square root of 121. If we're going to approximate this, we're going to say it's 11. Okay? Square root of 89, but it's negative. We'll deal with the negative last. The negative doesn't affect how you do it. It just affects your answer. So, well, 9 times 9 is 81. That's the low end. The high end would be 10 times 10, which is 100. Okay, well, this is 8 away from 81 and 11 away from 100. So it's closer to 81. So we're going to take the square root of 81. You get 9. Okay, and because that's there, just put it on your answer. Okay, it doesn't change how we do it. It just means our answer is negative. So it's negative 9. Okay. 204, if we're approximating that, let's think. Now we should know our FDs. 14 squared is 196. 15 squared is 225. So this is in between those two, which is what we want. Well, it's closer to 196. And when you take the square root of 196, you get 14. So if we're approximating this answer to the nearest whole number, we're going to say it's 14. Okay, and that's how you approximate these to whole numbers. Okay, find perfect squares that this number's in between, and just whichever one's closest, take the square root of that number. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Evaluate the expression when a is equal to 12 and b is equal to 4. So we're just going to rewrite this radical sign, and we're going to substitute. We got 12 for a, 4 for b. 12 plus 4 is definitely 16. And that definitely equals positive 4. Remember, the radical equals the positive. Okay, positive 4. Next one, we're going to take the square root, and we're going to square 4 underneath, and we're going to subtract 12. Remember, order of operations says you to square first and then subtract. So we're going to square first, 16 minus 12. That gives me the square root of 4, which is equal to 2. Remember, it's only positive. Okay, not negative and positive 2. Okay, the last one we're going to do here, we've got 3 on the outside, and inside we've got a times b, which is 12 times 4, plus 1. Okay, on the inside, we have to multiply first. 12 times 4 is 48, plus 1 is 49. So basically we have 3 times the square root of 49. Now the multiplication comes after you take the square root. Okay, you have to do the square root first. So the radical first, square root of 49 is 7. 3 times 7 would give you 21. Okay, and our final answer is 21. Okay, and that's how you evaluate when you're substituting numbers. Okay, let's look at the last slide. Now this is probably the best part of square roots, and that's solving quadratic equations. Okay, these are like 1- and 2-step equations. Anytime you see an exponent of 2 as the highest exponent in an equation, it means you're going to have 2 answers. Okay, you could have 2 real answers. You could have 2 imaginary or complex answers, but you won't get into that until Algebra 2, I think. Or you could have 2 answers which are 0, which would in reality just be 1 answer, but it's called a double root. So just think of this. When you see this, you're going to have 2 answers, usually a positive and a negative. And for you today, that's probably what's going to happen. So to remember, the square root is the opposite of squaring. It's the inverse operation. So it basically undoes the square root, if I can put that in bad English. Okay, so the square root of x squared is x. The square root of 81 is plus and minus 9. Plus or minus 9. Okay, so remember, we get 2 answers. We see the square there. Okay, first off here, before we take the square root, we've got to subtract 17. Remember, add or subtract first. Okay, we're going to get x squared equals, and that's going to be 36, I believe, 36. Now take the square root of both sides. We get x equals plus or minus 6. Okay, plus or minus 6. Next one, we're going to add 5. We get 2x squared equals 20. Okay, the next step is divide by 2, and we're showing our steps when we do this, taking us back to chapter 3. We get x squared equals 10. The next step is taking the square root of 10. Now, we can go ahead, since that's not a perfect square, just in your calculator, take the square root of 10. And we're going to round it to the tenths place or the hundredths place, whatever the instructions say to do. I'm going to do hundredths. So we get plus or minus 3.16. 3.16. Okay, let's do one more of these, and I think we'll be done for the day. We're going to add 1 to both sides. We get 0.5x squared equals 18. Okay, well, I'm going to divide by 0.5. Okay, basically dividing by 0.5 is like dividing by 1/2. And keep it, change it, flip it, you're multiplying by 2 basically. So we have x squared equals 36. Now take the square root, we get x equals plus or minus 6. Okay, again, the main thing to remember when you're solving equations, when the highest exponent is a 2, you're going to have 2 answers, unless, of course, you get 0. Okay, make sure you write both of those answers. And that should take care of us for today.